It is the second episode of the Blathering conversation. I have changed the title since last time. I was going with a wordplay thing that I hate. I was up late at night staring at the ceiling going, why did I announce that the name was a Blathervation? What am I, an idiot? We're not doing that. So welcome to the rebranded The Blathering Conversations. And with me today is a friend, a colleague, and he's a fan of me, and I'm a fan of him. And we're going to talk to Alden Diaz today. Alden, first of all, please praise me for changing the title.
I think it's a good move. I think that combinations of words to make new words is very like 2000s. I think we're past it.
Yes.
I think Blathervation is totally the type of thing that like Disney Channel would brand something as.
It's just so dumb. It's so dumb. I got a message from friend of the show, John Mariano, who is like, he's great with branding and stuff like that and good notes, but he sent a big paragraph and I read it. Johnny, if you're listening, I read it, but I didn't even need to read it. I just was like, I'm already changing the name. I'm already changing.
You're like, you saw the paragraph. You're like, I know this is about Blathervation.
This is about
I can feel it.
I don't have, look, and everyone knows I hate puns and I hate wordplay, but doesn't mean I don't think people are good at it. My friend Josh McCouga is good at it. My old friend Maud Garrett is good at it. Your friend Kelly Knox, good at it. Wordplay and puns. Yep. I'm not one of those people. There we go.
It's a hard. I mean, you're the actual like tried and true comic. Mm. Like, it's got to be one of the more specific and difficult forms to be good at in a way that's not gimmicky. Like, it has to be up there with like physical comedy for like, you're either good at it or not. There's not a lot in between.
Yeah, it's when a long time ago when at my old job, one of the store managers pulled me aside and we were friendly and he was like, I'm thinking of trying comedy. I'm like, that's great. And he's like, I've got some impressions. And I was like, just don't do Christopher Walken and you're okay. And he literally was like, oh, okay. And it's a fine line between genius and failure. But someone who rides the line very well in life is Alden Diaz. He hosts a lot of podcasts. You've probably heard Octo Radio. You definitely have heard him hanging out with me on Casterly Talk. We can't wait to get that back up and running. By the way, if you're a Casterly Talk fan, we'll have some stuff to announce soon. I still can't, I'm choosing not to cover with the SAG after strike still going as at the time of this recording. WGA's wrapped up. Alden, even though you might have covered some of the stuff, you're trying to hold the line as best you can too. So Casterly Talk will be back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. On the Star Wars side, for both of us, that being such a focus, it's really like screeched to a halt. I've covered a couple books because, the publishing industry is not struck. It's one of those like, find the line that works for you. Casterly Talk was in a situation where all those shows weren't on anyway. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit less of a knife. Like, you didn't feel that wound, but it is exciting to think about the future, and I'm excited about what we have to share. Not to be such a tease, but it'll be. Yeah. I feel good about where the industries are headed out of the abyss that they've been in for the last 3-4 months.
I hope so. And a lot more stuff here on my YouTube channel. Stick around, subscribe, do all those things. And one of the reasons I had a great time with Adam Knight last week talking about life, the universe, and pro wrestling. And you and I could probably do that too. You're a fan. I think you would do good in wrestling. You'd be a good mouthpiece, an announcer. I think you could do that. We could discuss that down the line here. But before I get to all this stuff, really, the big reason I wanted you here today is I was trying to think of who do I want to talk to? Who do I know? And I want to get myself comfortable with my own new format and my own way of new way of approaching interviews. And you and I have a rapport. We have a chemistry. But you and I really have only talked on air about the pop culture stuff, about the shows and the movies and the books and the stories. Now we're going to get real. Are you afraid of this?
Am I afraid of this exact moment? A little bit, but that's only because I get your texts and I know that you're in a place. And so this could be anything. This could be anything. You knew that I would be on this guest list because when you want to rage, who's always there?
Yes.
I'm there.
Yes. When I have a virtual baseball bat in my hand and I want to just, thump some Easter eggers. You're the guy I text. Even though, we don't always agree. I'm still struggling in that one space show. I like it a lot better than I did 4 weeks ago, but I'm still struggling. But we'll talk about this another time. Here's my first question. The only question I had planned for you, sir. Okay?
Yes.
I've known of you for a while. I'd say 2018, 2019 range. We met in 2019. Yeah. Started working together shortly after that. Really respect a lot of your skills. I want to talk about that down the line. But one of the things I was drawn to you as a friend is I'm like, this youngster. And I don't, you're not like my adopted son or like I'm your uncle. You're my nephew type of a found family relationship. You're more like if I had a stepmother and you were my stepmother's sister's son. Like you're like a second cousin to me. But you're an old soul. And my first question to you is, are you just an old soul that read a lot of books over your age group when you were younger, or are you just broken? What's the difference? And is there a difference?
Oh, it's so both. Like I think you become one because of like a fundamental break that happens very, very early.
Yes.
And that's in like big, heavy, dark, like, you know, I never had a father type ways, but also in like light, funny, I was chubby and like wasn't good at sports type ways. And so like both of those combine and there's one way out, which is like to be well read.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one way out. To be well read, to be clever, to try to listen to older people.
Yeah.
I was always fascinated by older people.
Yeah.
I liked storytellers. I would watch like Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton, rest in peace.
Lovely.
He's the best. And when I would spend summers in Connecticut, which is where I'm originally from, at the diner, I would sit with really less supervision than there probably should have been. I would just mosey over to like where like all the veterans sat and would just sit and listen to them tell war stories or, you know, just complain about things. And they just like, they didn't mind. They thought it was funny, I guess.
Yeah.
And I would just get my own little meal and sit there and not say anything, but just listen to these guys talk, and would see some of the same guys as I got a little bit older.
Yeah.
And then they all died.
Yeah, I know that feeling. There used to be a great group at the farmer's market where I worked at. A bunch of old guys used to joke around, and then one by one, the group got smaller. It was just the mortality of life faced me over my coffee. Okay, so I'm not off base saying you're an old soul, right? Do you feel that?
Oh yeah, okay. I've always felt that. It was hard to like. I was an easy child.
So was I.
I thought.
So was I.
And I just feel like I was really it was easy. I didn't act out. I didn't run away. I didn't have tantrums. That was just lucky. You know, my sister was a devil child. My sister was the worst. Has done it all, seen it all, run away, punched people out, got into fights, just everything you can think of. She's been there.
Yeah.
But I was easy, but when I did mess up, it was hard to punish because it was like what is go to your room to a child who will just read, like so I would just grab a book and just sit in there and come back out later and be like, I finished the book. Am I still punished? Like just things like that. I would my mom didn't restrict me on anything I read, watched, played, or the only time she ever stepped in front of the television and was like, nope, was a South Park episode. But that was just because she I guess was like, this could go into offense that I don't want him repeating,
or she just
type stuff.
Didn't want you to become a libertarian or something like that, right? Like,
yeah,
choose a side.
She's like, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to Cartman.
I don't care if you become a Republican. Don't be a libertarian. No. Yeah, this is fascinating. There's a lot of similarity. I'm unraveling why we work so well together and are friends. Like I was the quiet, good kid. My sister, God love her, she's doing great now. It was a little bit more of the breaking all the rules, call the problem. And then, I've been trying to find a way to talk about this on stage too. It's amazing to bring that up of just like, what is the punishment? Like I'm going to go sit on my couch in my room and read all my G.I. Joe Choose Your Own Adventure books. Heaven. Like the punishment, the punishment is to send me outside. Go send me to a party. That'd be the punishment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If they had said like run laps or like go climb that one tree that you climbed one time and were afraid to jump down, that type of stuff, that would have been more suitable for me. But yeah, I was a super old soul. I would ask really big questions. I was great examples. Like I was baptized Catholic. And then around 6-ish, when you're supposed to, do communion classes and get ready for communion, I openly said I didn't want to do it. Not that I had much of a grasp on what it was, but for some reason, I'm sure she regrets this. My mother asked me in front of other adults why I didn't want to do it. And I guess maybe I had heard or absorbed from a film or something that you have to confess. That confession was part of it. Maybe it was like a Daredevil comic or something that told me about confession. And something like that. Yeah. And I said, I don't want to tell someone I don't know what I've done wrong as a child. And so
so
it was things like that.
Look, Mom, this is between me and God. Old
There's nothing to do
Priest
with it.
O'Connor in there is not gonna, no.
Yeah.
No.
And so they didn't make me, and which was weird. And now a common criticism I've gotten later from like my mother and my sister is like, oh, we gave you too much freedom when you were a kid. We should have been harder.
Yeah, these kids these days getting all the freedoms and understanding their rights as humans is horrible. But that's that's fascinating. I was a little bit. I just went along with it. But this plays out in your personality. If anyone follows you on Twitter or social media, or if anyone tries to avoid you on social media, they know that you've got a lot to say, and you say it in an intelligent, convincing way. And it seems like that might have been something you had from your childhood. And I'm fascinated by that as a kid. There was a couple times, I took some stands, and looking back, they're comical stands I took. But I phrased them and wrote them out in such a way that it was just like, I don't think it could be denied. And yours was about God and confession. Mine was when I was about 12 or 13, I wanted to put up pictures of bikini models. Now, I don't condone that action. I want to be respectful, and I've understood that as I've gotten older. I at least want to understand what's going on. There was just blatant hormones, but I understand that my folks weren't going to let me put them up. But I came home one day, my sister had up pictures of some surfer guys that she liked from magazines. And I was just like, I do not stand for this. And wrote out the reasons why I respectively wanted. I remember it was Denise Richards, Sport Magazine. I was like, this is the same thing. And I won the argument. It lasted about a month, and I just didn't want a picture up in my room. But
but you saw the inequality, the inequities of your household.
My troubled life.
It is funny to look back on those situations, like you said stands you've taken.
Yeah.
So many of the ones I took were dumb. So many of them. I mean, like, and I also as a child had a very inflated sense of adulthood importance that like some teachers really responded to and some teachers didn't.
Meaning, explain that more. Ego-wise, which is fine, or just understanding your place better than others. What is that? Were you were the teachers fans of you?
Yeah, a lot of them were, and the ones that were, like, we were tight. Like, yes. I still to this day, I have the phone numbers of the teachers that I was close with as a teenager.
Yeah,
and like can hit them up now as an adult, as a friend, ask for advice or whatever. But I remember one time telling a teacher something in front of a teacher who I didn't have, who was just there like for like a meeting or something, and she was like, "Are you going to let him talk to you that way?" And the teacher that liked me was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Like, he's grown."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Well, he can." Yeah. Like, don't you find that refreshing? And I would, like I remember a couple times, like, in front of other students, just telling teachers, like, you should apologize, like, for the way you talked to me or someone else.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Just like, I enjoyed rabble rousing in a righteous way.
Yeah.
Because I figured, like, we only get to do this once. And, like, why not? Like, there's wrestling's already going to come up.
As it should.
There's a Paul Heyman quote, which, kind of the greatest used car salesman of all time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are some gems. Where he was told the old classic chestnut of pick your hill to die on. And his response was, why die on any hill?
Yeah.
Like, it might happen, but like, why choose?
Right.
Like, why die on any of them? And I absorbed that way early, where I've never been punched. But I've talked my way out of them.
Yeah.
I've talked my way out of getting arrested. I've talked my way out of getting hit. I've talked my way out of hazing.
Yeah.
It was great.
Love this. This is an old soul conversation because I hear that a lot, and I'd love to analyze it, not just about me and you and a lot of people in my life and where it comes from and what makes us, I joked about the dark thing earlier. I do think for some people, and I know some of the stuff that you've battled with in your life, that might force you to. And you made the joke about the sports thing, but yeah, okay, I don't have that as a currency, so I got to have this as a currency. I totally get that. My life, I said I can make jokes, but I had a great upbringing, and obviously, unfortunately, the world is sometimes built for a little straight white boy from the suburbs, and I had a good upbringing because of that. I have to be honest about it. But my struggles were all internal. Nothing from the outside was pushing in. It was all the darkness on the inside. And I think that made me an old soul early. Like, I was too aware that I'm not worth any of this. I was just too aware. And that kind of turned me dark. But then it did make me adult sooner, not in the check marks of what makes you adult, but just in terms of how to communicate and how to connect. And this is fascinating about the teacher thing. I was always friends with the teachers. I was always talking to them on a level. Like, I'd be the kind that, like, I'd have like the adults. I'd reference Procol Harum's "Whiter Shade of Pale," and they'd be like, "How? What? How do you?" And and this is in the late '80s, and that's only like a 20-year-old song at that point. But it was another lifetime for these teachers. And then you connect with them in a way, and it's fascinating. It only fuels the old soul thing, and put a pin in that because I want to see if there's a damage to that. But I remember sitting with an administrator or teacher who become an administrator, and she was like my economics teacher. We became friendly, and I went back to visit after I graduated high school, the first year after I graduated high school. And we're sitting there on the side of the football field watching the homecoming parade, and me and a friend are talking with her, and she looks, and we're watching like the homecoming king and queen, and no disrespect to anyone in their life who's had those titles. But she turns to me and she goes, "These kids never amount to anything. It's the people like you that do." And just like, but that's a burden on me. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And so I'm just wondering, do you feel there's any damage? And I rambled for a bit there. I blathered. Is there any damage that you think comes with the old soul package?
Yes. I think that people expect, in the way that teacher sort of illustrated with that comment, they have an expectation of you to be okay, like things are going to pay off. And so I think that there's a certain level of, we check in on you less and we worry about you less, and we write off your depressive episodes or your issues as, well, you're smart enough, you should be able to figure that out. I think a lot of it creates a certain level of loneliness, but at the same time, existing equally to that is the ability to find your tribe and your people. Like, I've had the same, I'm blessed to have a lot of different friends, like yourself included, a lot of our mutuals and podcasting and digital and all that. But even beyond all that, my same core group from ninth grade, we are still a group, and a couple of us are married to each other. There's been marriage in this group. The same ride or die people, and next year will be our 10-year from graduating, and so it's just, and it's big. There's like 12 of us that are just exceedingly loyal, always checking in, talking every day. One of them is a teacher at our old high school now.
Oh, I love that.
And so if you find people that are like you, I mean, in anything, but especially in that ability to communicate or that ability to express oneself, like, that is like equally as powerful, I think, as like the loneliness stuff is. And it's hard because you could be surrounded with thousands of friends and still feel lonely, which is another thing that I think we have to discover over time, which is that, like, contradictions can be true. Which is not something that they teach kids. I think that, like, I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about with like what they teach kids and what they don't. But the idea that two contradicting things can both be true is like, so key.
Yeah, I mean, you live in Florida, so they're not teaching a lot of things out there right now.
Nope.
Yeah, no, this is great stuff. You went to a positive fast there. I think you're right. I think again, I even tell myself, I have a good life, and that's a fact. That's a fact. But I always say to myself, and maybe I've said on podcasts many, many times, there's a danger in saying that to the point of denying your own struggles or pain, which it only means you then can't fix it or get better, or you're not understanding what's going on. And so I do think there was a bit of that burden. What you're talking about, I did feel around that time, because I had a lot of confidence coming out of high school. Not maybe on a lot of interpersonal levels. I wasn't, popular in the dating world like I wanted to. Yeah, I didn't feel I looked good, all those kind of things. And quite frankly, if you saw the beard I had at the time and hair, I don't know if it's any better now, but felt bad there. But I was like, great, I'm out. The world, it's time to go do this. I'm going to make a film. I'm going to write screenplays. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try stand up. But and then when things don't kind of click in right away, there's this like, well, wait a minute, that I'm better than this. Like, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And because you're an old soul, self-aware kid, it started to crumble fast on me. But I love what you're talking about, the positive, but I'm living in the negative.
Yeah, but that's true too. I mean, that even to go to small childhood, I'm sure you've heard it or some version of it. You don't want to finish the food on your plate, and one of your parents tells you about the starving children in another nation and things like that. And I remember even as a child being like, but that doesn't change what we're dealing with right here. My feeling is still valid.
Look, I can't change the Sudan, but I can change the peas on this plate. And that's the situation we're in.
We are this household. We are not the UN. And I think that's, that's the funniest way of speaking to what you're saying. Your problems are still valid.
Yeah.
But even while you're experiencing them, but they might be the thing that pushes you toward that positive, because it's all so intertwined.
Yeah.
How many people are you friends with or even romantically involved with now or in the past where it's because of trauma bonding and stuff? Yeah. That's a huge thing with, people. I think especially in arts and entertainment is we're the same kind of messed up.
The same kind of messed up is so great. I'm actually writing that down. I'm making the title of the show right now. Some kind of messed up. Same kind. He said same kind of messed up. I love that. That's great. I'm going to pay you extra for that title. I'm not paying Nick if he comes on though. I just wrote down same kind of title. I'm an idiot.
You're losing it.
I'm an idiot. Blathervations, word games. Switching gears a little bit, because we could get lost in our childhood here. I do want to. It's still a generational conversation, and this is where I might get a little grumpy. I recently did on an Other Center episode. The other reason, and this isn't just a smoke up ass conversation here, but the other reason I started working with you and pulling you in. And I have a habit of doing that, by the way, where I got in trouble when I was in radio. When I was 20, we had a caller that used to call into our radio station, and he was a youngster, and he was 12 or 13, but he wanted to be in radio. And I had wanted to be in radio when I was 11 and 12, and I was recording stuff in my room, in my house. And so I was like, hey, you send stuff in, I'll work with him. And then I actually brought him to the studio one time and said hi, and he was a great kid. And then I wanted to send him out to do a thing. And then the radio station people were like, there's some liabilities. And I was like, oh, I got in trouble for it. But I love working with other people who are like-minded or have a skill set that I respect. And also, if I can, I'll bring you up. And because one day the roles will be reversed, and I'll be calling you, Alden, and going, do you need anyone to talk Star Wars? So I've loved working with you. But you have a broadcaster soul. We talk about old souls. You have a broadcaster soul and a broadcaster's mouth, quite frankly, you dirty mouth broadcaster. But it's a general statement for me to say your generation doesn't have that in a widespread way. But I also believe that in my heart, that the art of broadcasting is changing, which is okay, but we still have the standards in which we need those skills. And I just see the standards slipping away. How did you come to know what you want to do and how to do it?
I will start by saying I agree with you, and that's a large conversation too, which is the democratization of any form. It's we've democratized broadcasting, which is great because everyone has a voice. Yeah. But at the same time, it's awful because everyone has a voice. Yeah. And those two things, powerful light, powerful darkness, from the same core thing, is really complicated. But in terms of me, a lot of it was I grew up wanting to make movies and write movies and things like that. And much like yourself, there is always still that Like that is still part of it. But I also wanted to get into show business, and I never wanted a regular job. Having a regular job was one of my greatest fears as a child. I feared it.
Still mine as an adult. I lost my job the
Yeah.
day of this recording. I lost the part-time job I had, and I fear that I have to face that fear soon. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's the thing, is that like you'll get a foot in and a foot out,
Yeah,
and a foot in and a foot out. It's like Adam West dangling above the shark. Like it's like it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I always knew it, and watched interviews with filmmakers and actors and things like that. And then I got, around middle school, I would watch like all of the Evening with Kevin Smith, like college Q&As, and like all the, the not stand up, but storytelling that kind of verged into stand up after a while, specials that he would do. And then started to watch like TED Talks and different things. And then I realized at some point that in early YouTube that people were just doing that, and that they weren't famous. And I thought, well, if famous people are doing it and regular people are doing it, then maybe it can be a career too. I ended up working in radio, but I didn't grow up listening to much of it. I would get
it would make
CDs
sense.
burned. And yeah. It was just around that time. It was it was just different.
It was fading. Yeah, it was fading. Yeah.
Yeah, and also where we were. Like we had a rock station in South Florida during that period that got format flipped, and we didn't have one for a while, and it was just complicated. And also the classic rock station took forever to change and become what it kind of needed to be, and which is ironic because I ended up being a part of what changed it and everything later on. But I realized that that talking was a currency, not just with teachers and people, but in general. And so I did theater, and I did debate, and I did like speech and forensics and things like that. Man, I wanted to, I want not be like a Roger Ebert, like a film critic, but I just realized that in whatever way I could use the muscle that I was just given, because it did just happen.
Yeah.
I didn't have like a voice cracky puberty period. I just woke up one day and sounded like this.
God bless.
And it was very abrupt.
I'm still waiting.
It'll happen for you.
Thank you.
I think.
Thank you.
I think it's the beard. You were given the beard, which I was not.
Oh, that might come in one day. Just do a Crix Maydeen and put one on. It's good.
God, I wish, man. That's the one thing I'm missing. Once I get a beard, it's over for all these people. It's over. I'm gonna go into my heel era.
There you go.
But yeah, it just seemed sort of like natural, where I didn't want to, like, I was never a musician, and I didn't think I was gonna be an actor, but I brushed with the idea of going to film school very briefly, but the cost just seemed ridiculous. And
it is. So
then I was like, you could just break in a different way, because it's all one organism. Like it doesn't feel as separate as it did for years. Like there are people that just do all the things. I mean, we've got YouTubers that are crowdfunding their films, and you've got authors that end up with radio shows, and it felt like you could just be all of those things.
Yeah, no, you said one organism. There's a lot of tentacles on that little scientific blob there. No, I agree that, and I'm fascinated. And I check myself all the time to not sound like the old, Wolfman Jack in the room. But Wolfman Jack is a great example. If he wasn't a cliche, cheesy DJ, he connected with the world at the time. That's why he was such a great fit for Lucas's American Graffiti there, and what radio could be. But And vlogging is a skill set. It's not one that I necessarily have. Sitting down and doing that over and over on YouTube, or reviewing movies, and even reacting. I don't like reaction content or videos, and I have some issues with it in terms of punditry. I think it's dumbed down punditry, but I don't react to. I don't do it well. I don't have the skill set, so I don't want to.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I don't want to shit on anything that anyone's doing out there, but it's just time and time again, I run up against, I even did it this last place I was working, where it's just like, y'all don't know how to talk into microphones. You don't know how to, if I give you 30 seconds, can you wrap it up in 29 seconds, in 29 seconds, in 59, like, you got to be able to do that in this business, and that's why it's a difference between professional and amateur. And I run into that over and over, not being a thing. But then you come along, my shining student on the hill. I don't even need to teach you anything. And I was just curious but it doesn't sound like you have a direct influence, because Mark Ellis and I talk about it. Mark's a great comic, but I think at times he's underrated as one of the great hosts in our town. And maybe
I agree.
Yeah, people will give him credit where credit's due, but we've talked about it, and he's said it's like, we grew up listening to Marv Albert and Bob Costas and Al Michaels and Vince Scully, and we're sports guys, none of us sports guys. But if it could have been news, Tom Brokaw, Peter Jones, and I'm not saying you need to be that on YouTube. Good evening, this is Peter Jones. But we knew how to run a show. But you didn't have anything specific for that. You just picked that up. You just knew it.
I think it was just like, the amalgam of all of these things, of wanting to pick, to sort of assemble a toolkit from all the people that I watched in different forms. A lot of it was professional wrestling. A lot of it was listening to those commentators. A lot of it was directors like, Kevin Smith. A lot of it was people like Robert Downey Jr. and like the way that he talked in interviews, and just like seeing like who could articulate a point, different comic book writers.
That
and
makes
things
sense.
Like that.
Yeah.
Because the broadcasters of our time, our being, for anyone listening to this, I'll be 28 at the end of the year. So that age. I know it's horrible.
Yeah.
We had like Ryan Seacrest, who's I say it like that. He's good at his job. I'm not going to say
he's spectacular. I used to listen to him on LA radio.
It's a reason he has a billion jobs. Yeah. Like realistically.
Yeah. I don't begrudge him.
But we had him. We were at the end of the end of an era. Like we had the like New Year's Rockin' Eve was dwindling. There was it was like the slowest changing of the guard ever.
Yeah.
So
rest in peace, Dick Clark. Did you get to watch Dick Clark? You got to see Dick Clark do that then.
We had Dick Clark. I had Dick Clark solo, I think, for the very end, and then they would just have him kind of there.
Yeah.
For those last ones, as
tough.
sort of honor him and stuff. But we didn't have like people that were standalone. Like these people are really good at it, and they are the pinnacle. These are the paragons of broadcast.
Yeah,
I sort of just picked it up and then found it as we went. And credit where credit's due. A lot of you guys that were at the forefront of the digital media push were the ones that I know a lot of our age group latched onto, whether that was, in middle school is probably the beginning of that boom for me. And I think 2013 is probably like when it got huge, and that was a decade ago, which is crazy, which means I would have been 17.
Son of a bitch.
So,
so
that's part of it.
Trust me. I think last time at a convention in London, I got a couple of those like, hey, yeah, how you doing? What's your name again? I used to watch you in high school. Like if I had met Dick Clark in 2001, it's painful on a special level. But hey, for what it's worth, I appreciate that. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean. We tried to set the standard.
Yeah.
We failed, but we set something.
And we could find, and you find the difference. You find what resonates with you, what type of speakers sort of work for you.
Yeah.
And so I don't, and I know you're not saying this, and I don't mean to either for anyone listening. We're not saying there's some like right way that people aren't doing now.
No.
It's just like you can have your individual style, but like today at the time of this recording, I complained on X about tiny ass microphones. What the hell are you doing?
I know what you're talking about.
And they're putting mic flags on them now, Ken. They're putting flags on these tiny.
Yeah.
Oh,
I got my love mic here. Yeah. I'm like, because look, if it's a cost thing and I totally get it, but like you're covering, I don't know. Now I do sound old.
But these are trades, man. These are trades.
You know what?
Like that's what gets
yeah, they're trades. Here's where I think I run up against some of the problems. Why I get a little grumpy about it. You're right. There's not a right or wrong way. I think there's a more professional way, not in the sense of the professional, but people feel the difference. You can tune into a podcast. We've all done this. We've tuned into a podcast. It might even be a little popular podcast, but the hosts don't know how to host. And people just listen to it in spite of themselves. So I get a little grumpy, but you're right. Numbers don't lie. But sometimes when I show up in new situations or I sit down to host, I am treated as if I'm doing it wrong. And that starts to twist my mind a little bit. I'm like,
Yeah.
just because I can hit the post on a song doesn't mean like I'm wrong. This was right.
And I think that's the difference between style and approach, right? Like, because you can be more comedic. You can be more of a new generation sort of like vibes person. You could be the older person. You could be an angry guy. You could be whatever it is.
Right.
But is the decorum there? Is the team effort there? Is the making sure that you're hitting different aspects of a thing if it's a review? Like it's not that there's one way to present oneself. It's just like there's a level that you do it on.
Yeah.
And it's hard to articulate, but it's sort of like the government's definition of pornography. Like, you know, when you see it, like, it's like,
that's what I've always said about my podcasting career. It's just like porno. It's just like
just pornography. It's had the same highs and the same lows.
People confuse me and Tanya Tate all the time. I'll tell you.
Yep.
Don't look her up, kids. She's a nerd. Look her up. I got really weird and aggressive. I don't watch her work. Here's this is great, and you've made me feel better about being the old grumpy man in the business. And I gotta continue to change and grow, but I gotta continue to stand my ground on things that are good. But anyways, all that segment was, Alden, was to say, like, there's a reason we work together. I think you're really great at this, and I'm just trying to make you feel good.
No, and I appreciate that. And the way we started working together, for people that don't know, was that you were doing Casually Talk solo for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
There would be Rachel, Lon, Andres, different people that would pop in. But you were taking calls, and I'd listened to Force Center for a while and had loved what you guys were doing over there. Jumped over to the Game of Thrones side of things and would listen to the show and think, I wish a call would bring this up, or like, I wish we could talk about this. And a lot of it would just became from like, well, he's giving us the opportunity to, like, essentially, if you can make the most of your call, you could produce from the sidelines.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I throw him something that's really, really good, I was like, then I'll get to listen to the thing that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
But I also was like, but I'm not going to send in a bad call. Like, you know, I'm trying to like, I have to represent because I have like my own show. I have my own stuff going on. Around that time, I think I had started at the station. I was like an assistant and a phone screener and things like that. And then after a while, it was like we were having these conversations on delay.
Yes.
And then it was like, well, then why have them on delay?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. Because you'd send them in and I'd get the episodes out in like a week or two. Yeah. Your calls are great. You, Thomas, Mark Kamar, you know, Eric, a lot of people calling in, but yeah, you had a special edge to it. And then I met you and you seemed harmless. Like you wouldn't kill me and wear my skin.
Yeah. We had met in Chicago. That's the other part of it. We met in Chicago. I remember I met you and Joseph.
And Darina was there with us that time. Yeah.
And Darina.
Yeah.
And I've met a lot of people in Chicago. I mean, Chicago was sort of a boom. That was like that was a big thing for content creators. And as much as I hate the term sometimes. And I remember meeting Joseph and introducing myself, and he was like, "Oh, are you Alden Diaz?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You ask really good questions."
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah," because I think we can have a better conversation. The royal we. That is the driving force behind everything I do. It's why I don't quit even when I want to quit.
Yeah.
Like there were times, like especially during, you know, the Star Wars show that starts with the word book. I don't want to get too much into the struck content.
Yeah, you know, I think all strikes will be cleared. Let me check my fake watch in about a month. I think we'll see.
Yeah, like, oh boy, there's a show on Disney Plus called Book of Something, and people were just, man, they tested me. But I won't leave on their terms. Like that's the thing that I've always held on to.
If you've always been like that, is it a stubbornness, a bullheadedness? Don't want to be wrong. What is it?
Yeah,
because I like where you're going with this. Of like we, the royal we, can have a better conversation about media or the things that mean a lot to us. But yeah, it's sometimes a fight.
It is absolutely a stubbornness. It's it's just wanting to be. I remember as a kid, I used to say like, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm just afraid of dying and like not being remembered." I think it's like I want to be able to say.
Hold on. Did you scroll that on a fake tattoo as you got on your motorcycle and rode away? Like,
No, no, but I have an edgy, I have the edgiest tattoo from the Wizarding franchise that shall not be named these days. So it's there
I
somewhere,
love it.
and I only wear black.
Yeah.
I just part of it I think is like it's about to get really dark for anybody listening. Not really dark, but decently dark. I think the abandonment issues that I have with, not that my dad abandoned me, but just like there's not a good word for it because he was never there.
He just never.
So I
Yeah,
guess it's just like the absence issue.
He pre-abandoned.
Yeah, exactly. He he saw the loading screen and was like, those those issues I think cause people, at least in my experience, to really become bastards for standing their ground, because it's like so much was decided before I was even making decisions that it's like, you're not going to decide now. Like it's done. Scorched earth. It'll be scorched earth before I quit or end the podcast or anything like that. It would have to be some incredible reason or opportunity or anything, because I just don't think that bad faith actors should be able to just run wild and we let them. Like, I don't like letting people. I think that's that too, is that like I've seen people, like one of my own parents, do something shitty and never face a consequence for it, and that created like this like justice like tunnel vision that I get into about things that don't matter, like,
well, yeah, okay, yeah.
Lightsabers.
They do and don't, right? That's the push and pull of the stuff we cover on our podcast, or even the stuff we just love. I've given this example before. And I apologize. I'm always the uncle at the party telling the stories again, but it's the kingdom of heaven ending, where they ask, Saladin, what is Jerusalem worth? And he says nothing. And then he turns around and says, everything. It's one of my favorite moments on film, because there's just something about that moment in the film that I love, but there's something about that moment in life that I think really connects with me. It's this everything. I do believe how we talk about this stuff and how we digest it and how we spit back out the punditry in a world where everyone has a voice, which I do say, like you said, is a good thing. But man, how we do it is important, because it is connected to everything else. It is how we view the world. It is how we see the social issues. It is how we deal with the political issues. And there's so many people who I think are on right sides of fights in other arenas who just seem to take the weird turn in the pop culture world that it upsets me. And I like you say you have a sense of justice and you have a bullheaded stubbornness to this pursuit that you're talking about that comes from abandonment issues. I have picked up on that lately. I used to just not care, but now I'm just like, it's not. I'm trying not to be angry about it. I don't know if you agree with me, Alden, but it's like at the bottom of the fight for me, despite some anger, some snark, some problems, some grumpiness I have to maybe people in the space, especially the Star Wars podcasting space. Beyond that is just going, but there's such a better way we could all figure out how to talk about this and maybe all learn from it and to take it out into the other parts of our lives. And don't you want to do that? No, you don't. You want to talk about the colors of the speeders. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's because it does matter to us so much, and because it was there for us and we want to share that. So part of it is just wanting the human experience of it to be really rewarding. But at the same time, I think it's also because it's a dangerous line when it's such a fundamental part of who we are. Then it feels like, so you're knocking that thing that I have a relationship with. That's the dangerous thing that happens online, is like, then you're knocking part of my experience. And also part of it, I will admit, is ego. And part of it is a little bit like edgy, a little pretentious, a little this, because the stuff that I loved, where I felt at home growing up in school, especially like in English class and things like that, was kicking stuff around. And you could be wrong, which I think people forget. Like, a lot of the times people get pre-defensive online and they're like, it's not that I didn't get it.
Right.
It's just bad. And it's like, I don't know. Yeah. I remember teachers being like, read that chapter again. You didn't get it.
Right.
And that was okay. That was
It was
okay.
okay.
That was good. It was encouraged. There are sometimes things that I just didn't get.
Yeah.
And I think that that's fine. But we've gotten to, this is where I sound old and like I'm betraying my own age group. It's like, no, sometimes it is you, or sometimes you are just bringing stuff to the table that is informing your experience with it, which we all do. That's a fundamental part of it, but you have to be aware of that, and
Yeah.
self-awareness is a big problem online.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but
Yeah, look, I'm struggling on that on the current Space Saga show, where I have to try to really separate what I'm dealing with. You and I've talked about some of the stuff where I'm not able to talk about it on air, so that put me in a weird headspace. And two, I'm not feeling it, and that's okay. Number one, and two, I have to still talk about it and find what's there while respecting everyone else's journey. And I, for the first time in 9 years of doing this, have run up against a wall that I'm trying to get around. But I think you're saying some great stuff about it's okay. And it's okay that maybe I might revisit and be like, oh yeah, I didn't get it. I wasn't there for it because of X, Y, and Z. But I have to admit that. I have to admit that sometimes I don't.
And it might never happen.
And it might
and
never
then
happen.
It's like, well,
you know,
that's just part of it too. Like there are some.
I just don't like the man in the cowboy hats dialogue, but that's okay. But anyways, here's. We're gonna take. I want to take a break here on the show, on the podcast, and the YouTube side, because now you can kind of control where the mid rolls go on YouTube. But you said some stuff I want to get to, and that stuff, Alden, is ego. More coming back right here with Alden Diaz, the Blathering Conversations, not a Blathervation. All right, we're back here talking with Alden Diaz, having a fun conversation. There's some paths in front of us. I could choose the path that says, Alden, talk to me about your abandonment issues. Let's get dark. I want to maybe get into you and your generation in the world right now. I'm curious about that in a deep and hopefully profound way. But also, you said ego, and there's something I love about you. I've been around you enough to know that I think you're a real one. Meaning, that's a term probably I'm too old to use, but I think you're self-aware in both good and bad ways. But online, you know how to fight. You know how to dig in. And one of the things I can't do it because I get angry, I get mad, and within 2 tweets, I'll be like, oh, "Wait, where do you live? I'll come to your house. I'll fight you." Like, and you have a ability to stay in the pocket. To use a sports reference, just for you, a big sports fan, you stay in the pocket, of course, as an online quarterback, and I start running out. Do you have the ability, where does it come from if you do have it, to just be okay with not being liked? Or does that drive you crazy and that's part of what spurns you on even harder?
I have said for years, I am very comfortable being disliked. What bothers me is being disliked for things I didn't do or didn't say.
Sure.
Or like you could have the most vitriolic black goo coming out of your mouth hatred for me. And that's really ultimately okay. But if I even hear a whisper of like well, he thinks this, and it's not accurate, that sends me up the wall. Like hate me for the things that I said. You know, I'll skirt around some of the space show stuff, but like I already referenced this, like the show that starts with the word book. There's a reason why it does. And that's because of biblical formatting. And that's, that's my read, but it's an informed read. Those same creators have now used a biblical name in the show they're doing. They used a biblical story in the show they just did. This space story started with a biblical allusion to the biblical character. So it's like, fair. I said this online, and I had a bunch of people who are, I would say, in the same age group as me, who probably politically align with me, who we would probably dance and sing to the same songs. And they were like, he's so up his own ass and he's bringing the Bible into it. And he's saying that it's like a Christian thing. And it's like, that's actually not at all what I did or said or thought. Like, I don't subscribe to a religion. I don't. But if we're going to, in good faith, talk about these things and their influences, that's a part of it. And if you don't like that, that's a you thing. So part of it is that it's I can stay in those fights because I know why I'm there. And if they don't know why they're there, then I'm comfortable with that. We can do sort of like the if I've yet to have this on Twitter, I've had it in person, which I always love, which is when somebody straight up challenges you in a good way.
Yeah.
And not to make it weird, but like, especially when it's a woman, as a heterosexual guy, like when I was at a party one time and somebody called me on my knowledge of Shakespeare. And we had a little tit for tat about Shakespeare. And then I was like, I am in love. I haven't seen that person in 7 or 8 years.
That's your best. See, I know that well. This gets me sometimes. I grew up on banter, in a rom-com banter. Han and Leia, to be direct about a banter, even Marion and Indy. And so sometimes that's what I want. And sometimes Grace has to just be like, stop. Stop. And I'm just like, hey, zinger. And so you have a different version of that where you're just like, it's the two people in the rom-com who scream at each other, maybe slap each other in a nice way on the cheek, and then passionate love is made. Like you just feed off of this. You feed off the discourse in a good way.
I do in certain ways. Like I just like, and it's to the point where like I have people that will send me like, oh, look at this bad take. And it's like, because they want to see it. They want it to be, entertainment.
Yes.
And sometimes it's, sometimes it's tiring and it can be exhausting. And I've had people like try to character assassinate me over things I didn't do, say, or make. Someone tried to pin me for a sock puppet account last year that I didn't make about a space show. And I was, annoyed by it, but it's more so like annoyed at the lack of dignity. Like, let's fight in the daylight. Like, come out here, stop with this. Like, I loved the good, like, rip each other apart. But maybe like shake hands after.
Yeah. You see the pro wrestling in you is coming out here. I get it. Now,
I think that's part of it.
Look, I'm expecting, decent numbers on this episode by half of the people that like you, and then the half of the people that hate you will probably stick around. It's like the Stern factor from back in the day. One of the things I want to get to here, and we got a good chunk of time left, a few minutes left, I guess, but and we can get to the daddy issues if you want, but I love our generation gap, you and I, 20 years or so, and we become good friends and colleagues, and I hope allies in the fight. And there's been a lot of times where I can talk to you and say, hey, I know this might be this or that, and either talk me through it or hear me out, and you never judge me for it, you work through it, and other way around, and I love that, not just with you, but other friends I have who are younger, but. Your generation, what are you technically, young millennial or old Gen Z?
I am the people my age are the last millennials.
You are the last of the millennials. Great, Michael.
The last millennials are 27. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, which is interesting. So it's like technically on paper, your generation, we're only one generation apart, but really you're closer to the other one. But all of a sudden, I don't want to get into the generational breakdown stuff, but the world right now is bonkers. It's always been bonkers, I will argue. We just know more about it, but yet it's bonkers because I think a lot of the storylines we've been following for 10, 20, 40, 50 years are coming to an end. If it's a wrestling, if life is like wrestling, which I think it is, we're hitting our WrestleMania point where the storylines are coming to an end. We got to figure out what we're going to do with some of it. Where are you? What's your soul like? And when you wake up in the morning, and how do you get through this world? How do you want to change this world? And how do folks like me in my age group either hurt or hinder that for you, or help?
Oh man, where do I start? Like waking up, dread, pain, like just immediate dread. Like I was joking recently on an episode of the podcast that I do about the space shows, where I was like, my action figure self would come with different little medication bottles and everything, and like I've got wake up meds, I've got go to sleep meds, like I just which is not for everybody, and then I understand that, but I wake up with a crushing dread. Like the sound of my alarm despite my best efforts, my
Yeah.
alarm is John Williams right now.
Yeah.
It's John Williams
Same.
track.
Same.
I try to set a tone, but like,
Mm.
no, I feel
Mm.
deep sadness for where we are, but I think in the same way that I apply the like they don't get to choose how it goes down mentality
Mm.
with discussions and with media literacy and things like that, I also feel that way politically and socially. Like, why should they get to decide the ending of the storyline?
Mm.
Like, we
Mm.
it can't be, because you got to understand, like, I don't know how it was when you were in high school and things like that, or middle school, high school, really, but we were raised on a lot of like dystopian literature, a lot of dystopian YA, things like Gathering Blue, things like 1984, things like Animal Farm.
Mm. Mm.
Some people didn't have, it wasn't like curriculum, but Hunger Games was huge.
Mm.
There was a lot of that in our books and our curriculums and our video games. And
Mm.
Handmaid's Tale was one that we read.
Mm.
And all of that always made it seem like when these times came, it will have been duplicitous and well thought out and in the shadows
Mm.
and dark, and it will be people of high intellect and brute force power, Machiavellian planning. And none of that was true. It was the dumbest, loudest, most ridiculous, cartoonish, obvious shit.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like I felt like I was in that line in that space movie. How did this happen?
Yeah.
We're smarter than this. like it really, like, that's how I feel about our entire place
Yeah.
in society right now. We're like I've talked to old teachers and I'm like, you taught us that like it would be like this slow crawl, one freedom at a time, and like, nah, they like put on colorful hats and screamed and let us know exactly where and who they were, and it's completely different. So
Mm.
that answers how I sort of feel, although I do still feel hope. Like, hope's important.
Yeah.
Hope's a choice a lot. Hope's a currency sometimes. Hope's a thing you put the bill with other people sometimes.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to, like, when people like steal electricity from their neighbors, sometimes you have to steal hope from your buddies.
Yeah.
And just like
That's fair.
you see something good happen to a friend,
Yeah.
and you're like, tell me about it. What is it like for
Yeah.
for a good thing?
You know why? Because we're the same kind of messed up, and maybe now you have the up and I'll have the down today. But yeah, that's
Yeah, it's like nice alternating. And then as for your other question, how does your generation help or hinder? The openness to just say, I don't know, is so powerful, which you're great about. Joseph's great about.
Mhm.
I don't know if Jennifer counts as the same. She's like kind of in between our ages, right? Maybe
No, she's right. Yeah, she's
closer
right
to
there with
you,
Joseph. Yeah.
right there.
Closer.
Yeah, like,
Yeah. Same.
she's great about it. My mother has gotten so much better about it. Like, she was never,
Yeah.
I would say, like, black-hearted,
Mhm.
but I think, like, my mom grew up like tough, like, sort of, you got to be tough. She's been through hell, things like that. But now we'll like ask a decent question. And sometimes it's frustrating because sometimes I don't think she wants the answers. But
Yeah.
we've said that, and I will say with you here, guys that we know, the Nickies and the Scotties, and just all these people that we know in this space who are closer to my age. Chase, Maggie Bacella, people that were on Casually Talk with us, the Damons. We've had these conversations of like how you and Joseph and Jennifer like really are the type of like 40-year-old that we're looking for. Like, there are other people that shall remain nameless where we're like, it's like you get to that point where you can choose to be a Ken or you could choose to be something else.
Insert a big thing of a name. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then stop there. I'll say this in one of those moments where I have to be on. I will take the compliment because it means a lot to me, because it wasn't just who I was. I've had to work at being better and being part of the solution, and so I'm happy to be like, oh, okay, the personal work I'm doing or have done or the choices I'm making, I'm not always perfect, never will be, but like I respect it. I actually respect you sharing that with me, because it's like, It's a choice. It's a choice. And talking about the generational exchange, something you said earlier too, of just like being able to say I don't know. And I can sometimes get a little upset with that what I call the TikTok generation of a lot of youngsters think they're the first ones to discover this problem or this issue. I always joke of like a TikTok video is like, hey, does anyone else here have parents? It's like, yeah, every generation's had this, but every generation has their own set of problems. You're not the first to discover it. So, hey, don't treat us as if we've been through it before. But then the problem, because what I deal with the generation, the baby boomers before me, there's examples in my life of people who are doing what you say. Oh, you know what? There was a lot of things I knew, and there's some things I still know, but I don't know everything now because new shit has come to light, or new information, or hey, times have changed. And the roadblocks are the people in my life, and sometimes they're in my generation. A lot of times they are my generation, where it's just like they don't want to face the possibility that there could be a different way, and that's not necessarily bad. We'll find our way. That's why I always say, don't fight change, find your place in change. But it was a choice of mine, because 10 years ago, if I had I did have a podcast 10 years ago. Oh my God. But 10 years ago, it was a harder struggle for me. I was a little bit more, I'm right, everyone else is the asshole. And now I'm like, everyone else, especially Alden, Scotty, Nikki, maybe Alex, you're right. And I'm the asshole if I'm not careful. Yeah. And that's why we're in this together.
I think that's that exactly. That humility. It's humility. Like it's
the greatest human in the world, Alden. But on this, I'm humble now.
It's the, but really, like it is. God, it's so funny. I don't know if you've experienced this. I mean, I'm sure you have on Other Center and things. Like we talk so much in pop culture reference.
Oh, yeah.
Just like as a shorthand for life. Like in this topic, you'll know exactly what I mean. In this topic, I was about to go to Indy and talk about like, humbling yourself, and especially in Raiders and Crusade. Like, but you get what I mean.
I talk about everything in terms of pro wrestling storylines. It was great to have Outlaw Adam Knight on last week, a man who's still in the wrestling ring, because I could literally discuss the plot of Game of Thrones in wrestling speak, and so I feel you on that. I know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like just the ability to say, I don't know, but I am willing to. I actually just reminded myself of something. I don't know. But I am willing to learn. I had a teacher in middle school who taught computer applications, and his name was Mr. Schneider. I should try to find him. Don't know where he is. Christian Schneider. And he always wore old band tees. He couldn't hear out of one of his ears because of combat. Wow. He had a long ponytail, and he would always like air guitar when he was just like trying to think of stuff, and would play like classic rock in school. Whenever there was a typing test or an exam or anything like that, he would play under pressure.
Love it.
Weird cat.
Love it.
Really great. And he had a rule that if you didn't know the answer to something on an assignment, you would not count against you if you wrote out the sentence, I do not know, comma, but I am willing to learn.
That's beautiful.
You would never get the point off. It didn't matter if you did it 10 times.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that until this moment. That is so valuable. Just say, I don't know. And I'm a person that likes to learn about topics that have nothing to do with me, even if I'm not, even if it's not like, there are some things you learn about and you're like, I'm going to apply that tomorrow. There are some things I want to learn about that I will never, ever apply. Ever apply. The person that I'm dating right now is a mortuary archaeologist. The study of death.
You're dating a comic book character. This is cool. This is great.
Yes, I'm dating Bruce Wayne. There are mortuary archaeologists. I will never, ever use some of the stuff that they tell me about their job. But I like hearing people with expertise talk about their stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just something that's just really good, like to just be a sponge, to be flexible.
I think it is the biggest thing. It's the biggest obstacle to change, without a doubt. But with looking at the state of the world, and I've struggled to put this into words because, again, I don't stay in the pocket when I argue. I get a little emotional and I try to run away and I get sacked. But you stay in the pocket. But when I see the changes going on, and every generation deals with changes, right? The greatest generation
Mhm.
struggle with the baby boomers. You know, Elvis Presley's shaking his hips on TV. How dare the devil put this on our screens? Like it happens, but it's all connected. It's all connected. I don't mean that conspiracy theories wise, but I keep moral panic leads to the satanic panic leads to this, and it's all powerful versus the powerless. It's all fear versus hope. It's all that stuff. It's light and dark. It's why that space saga works so well, why we love it, and why I do think how you take in the space saga does affect how you take in the world. But there's been a radical change to me in history, in a sense of we get more of the picture. We're able to get more information. We're able to share more information. And if you don't go back and look at how we got here and realize what you thought you knew or what you were told it wasn't necessarily all a lie. I'll use in general terms. And if you're a history buff out there, bear with me. You go into like the Civil War. There's such of when you're debating, say, Republican versus Democrat, there's such a proud use of the Civil War and Lincoln as the Republican who ended slavery, and we did this as the Union, as the North. And there's so many truths to that. And we can talk about the party switch and all that stuff later on. But when you go back and actually study it, and there's some great resources out there to study it that are what I will say honest looks at Honest Abe. He wasn't as great as people thought. He wasn't as bad as people thought. And he had to be kind of convinced. And he and Frederick Douglass weren't necessarily friends, but he had to be convinced. And when he said yes, you know what? Slavery must end. The North, they had a revolt. The New York draft riot was one of the worst riots in the world. And people, the white folks didn't want to die for the slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all these truths. So you can either engage with that and go, okay, that might reframe how I look at our journey forward, or you can go, nah, we ended it. Slavery, we won it. We're good. Praise us. And that's what I run into time and time again, not just with Civil War discourse, but just with social discourse now. And I think that's one of the things that clearly I get a little upset about. Of just like, can you just say I don't know, but I'm willing to learn? I'm going to use that now, Alden. You and your teacher, Dr. Elsha Snyder, Christian Snyder, Dr. Snyder. I'm going to use that because that's a valuable, powerful tool.
Yeah, and people are very uncomfortable with the idea that they might ever have to be uncomfortable.
Yeah,
that the feeling of not knowing can suck, or the feeling of feeling put on the spot can really suck.
There's the fear of it.
It could be embarrassing, exactly. That fear motivates people to be cowardly or to lock up, and we're all guilty of it.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, it's just I think that's the thing about the generations, and my generation, the same thing will happen. Like
it will happen.
We are, I don't want to say doomed to repeat it, but like we're gonna repeat it. You know, I see it with my sister's kids and the world that they're gonna have, and hopefully something changes, but it's difficult. It's difficult for sure.
It's gonna, I can't wait until I'm in the old folks' home and you're over here going, and then their cars don't even touch the ground. These kids, but it will happen, and that's the constant challenge for all of us in every generation. And I fight against tossing out everything about the previous generations. I bristle a little bit at anti-boomer stuff. I get it, and there's a lot on their hands right now that they need to answer for. But they also moved a lot of things forward too. It's just the nature of it. But it's what you talked about earlier about it's a little more complicated, light and dark, right and wrong. It's all kind of it can be both. It can be both. But you have to be, I think, responsible for your place going forward and try to leave it better. Alden, I'm just trying to leave the podcast world better for you than it was for me.
It's not cool to be gray. You still have to make a choice.
Yes.
You still have to do something while you're
gray. You're making a reference to the space. I don't need to be kid all the time, but the Star Wars concept of gray Jedi, which I will say with a fist pounding a desk, does not actually exist in the story as it's told. There can be gray moments, and there's characters and journeys that travel through the gray. And I think even in a show or a series like A Song of Ice and Fire, that everyone, I love the gray. Do I root for Cersei or do I cheer against her? It both. But at the end of the day, she made a choice. And at the end of the day, her actions were wrong. you could travel through the gray areas because we all travel through the gray areas, but there's a stubbornness that some people have that they just stick in the gray. And that's kind of with a little bit of what you're talking about of the, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn.
It
Cersei
becomes a
should have
cop
said that.
out.
Cersei should have said that.
And Tywin would have said, "Okay, learn while you're marrying this guy. Learn while you bring some honor to our house."
Way more complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's so cowardly sometimes, and it's so
Yes.
frustrating
It's
to see
frustratingly cowardly. Yes.
like it's a lack of backbone. Like I think is like it's hard, right? Like when you're in like the dating stuff or like, you know, young and trying to find your person or whatever. I've had people say like, you know, why don't you make a list of like the things you're looking for in a partner? And I'm like, I don't know how to write conviction. Like I don't know how to write like
Number one,
backbone and like a spine.
conviction.
Like it's hard to articulate, but like people that stand for nothing almost frustrate me more than people that stand for ill.
Yeah.
And like logically I know who's the you know,
Yeah.
duh, I'm not saying it worse, but ooh, it's its own kind of annoying.
Yeah. No, look, yeah, that's where it gets a little frustrated. Of just like, yeah, sometimes you and I were even talking off air, but it's like there's a lot of, I think, troubling comics and podcasts and YouTube channels and Star Wars pundits, and there's a lot of bad ones out there, and they're all bad faith. And I'm not talking about the people who might be debating about what book means for Book of Boba Fett. I'm talking about monsters on air making a lot of money, and I get upset at them. But at the end of the day, I think I really get upset at the people who just accept that this is the only choice they have and that this is great and they're going to stick with it. I get upset at, like you said, I get upset at the voters sometimes, not the candidates.
Yep. Yeah, it's like, you know, you'll see a thumbnail that's just garbage and you know it's garbage and just a brain dead moronic asinine take. 33,000 views.
And a destructive take,
you know,
towards
6 hours.
society. Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll have like 33,000 views in 6 hours or 100,000 in a week. It's just like,
yeah,
absolutely mind numbing. It feels almost useless, but it all, you know, it's the theme of this conversation. It's like, why do they get to decide? Why do we have to leave or stop or let them dictate what the terms of the conversation are going to be? It reminds me of this line in Serenity that Nathan Fillion's character Mal has, where he says like, there's a lot of fine ways to die in the universe, and I'm not waiting for the Alliance to choose mine.
Yeah.
I've always thought of that.
Yeah.
Like I can't fathom like we talked about it off air. We've joked like if we just decided to throw away all of our morals and everything, we could have so much money. The money is there for the taking. Like,
look, yeah, no, I don't say this, you know, again, my life's been really easy. I truly ain't no hero standing on the right side of history. That should be the only choice people make. But yeah, I could have chosen a different path creatively on YouTube or other things and podcasts. And I see some of the surface rewards, but it's like, what is that? What is success? Is it clicks and podcast revenue money? That certainly wouldn't hurt. It's what I want. I hope this episode gets the most views I've had. And I hope more people tune in, and I hope more people enjoy the kind of conversations I want to have here. But it goes to what you're saying. I can't worry about that. That's not my definition of success. My definition of success is trying to put a little bit more thought out into the world, and not in a finger wagging way, but just in a, hey, let's all try to move forward together with this. Unfortunately I got stuck with you as a guest today, but we'll get there.
It's true. You could try again next week.
This is, yeah. This has been fascinating, buddy, and I think you and I could talk on and on and on. And definitely the nice thing about this series, the Blathering Conversations, not a Blathervation, is it's not like the old days where I used to do Napzok files, and if you did your interview, that was it. You're done. You rarely come back. I want to have these kind of conversations more and more with you, and trying to leave on a hopeful, positive note. We've talked about a lot of deep things. We touched on your abandonment issues here that you have. Yes. We got all those things, but the weight of the world might be on your shoulders, but what is one thing that gets you up every day? Little, small, big, where you don't feel any of those issues. You don't feel any of the burdens. You just kind of get up with a smile.
Let me tell you all about the value of dogs. Like, and I know you know this
yes.
As a dog lover, as an owner of dogs, you and your fiance Grace, two proud Chihuahua parents in this world. My dog, his name's Mando. He's a Pomeranian Shiba a pomshi, as it were. This dog, he's not in here right now because he was more interested in chasing the bulldog around the yard. The bulldog's my mom's dog. But Mando, who I got during COVID, before a vaccine, he was just, I think he came from like a puppy mill and this place had him or whatever. And they were like trying to move these dogs out of there, like a puppies and rescues thing. And he was in that, he's like too old to be a puppy, but like too young to be a dog. Mm-hmm, like he was like in that sort of spot,
like the Britney Spears song. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like they were like, we're going to mark him down a little bit in price. Yeah. And like, I was like, what is going on? What's going on with this guy? Like, he's so precious. This dog, it's not an exaggeration to say, has ferried me from the worst times of my life to these rebuilding times by not doing really much at all. Mm-hmm. Like, they are low effort creatures. It's not like I have to sit and meditate with them every day. It's just him being around gives me some sort of hope because they are so well intentioned. And when people, it sounds like such a generic answer, but when people talk to me about like depression or they ask like what I do, I'm like, get a pet. Like, getting a pet is so, if you can afford it, because it is, it can be expensive. Some, if he jumps off the couch tomorrow and broke his leg, that would fucking suck, but it's just like the ability to tune in with someone that really needs you and takes you as you are, because, not to put a negative note in the positive note, but one thing I've learned is that sometimes you'll get people that'll be like, are you okay? Like, they could text you every week and be like, Ken, how you doing? You okay? But some people don't ask if you're okay because they want to know. It's because they don't want to deal with you if you're not okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they are very fair weather, and they want to pick their spot and everything. Dogs don't do that. So like, dog, best thing. Yeah. Second best thing, using my Dunkin' rewards points. The best, the best moment of my day. Beautiful. Is converting those points to a free iced coffee.
Wonderful. Greatest thing. Asked and answered in a wonderful, beautiful way. Alden Diaz, it's great to get to know you even more than we already do here. I love you to death and can't wait to get you out here for some smokehouse cheese toast again soon. Thanks for listening out there. And Alden, tell them where they can find and follow you, and any final words from you here.
Yes, you can find me personally at that Alden Diaz, ThatAldendiaz, on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Hive, TikTok, pretty much all of them, but I use like one of them. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't have time. I don't have an assistant. I'm not an influencer. No. But yeah, I would say everybody just keep tuning into these conversations, not these Blathervations. Thank you again for having me. I'm excited. We could do like 100 more of these and they'd all be different. So I'm game.
Maybe we will. I'm out of here. We'll see y'all next time. Hey, some housekeeping. It is official now. My first comedy release of my comedy EP, In My Day, live at the Harrison Pub in London, will be available October 10th, or if you're listening later, it is available. There is, you can get it on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. You can stream it there or you can purchase it. But also, I want to let you know there's a special edition with bonus content available directly from me on Bandcamp, kennapzok.bandcamp.com. That will be available on October 10th as well. You can support me at patreon.com/Ken Napzok if you'd like to, but the best way to support, just listen, give a like, give a comment, spread, share, tell people about what we're doing over here, because a lot more is coming. We'll see you next time on The Blathering Conversations. I got it right this time.